Hey, Mark Meldrum, Meldrum's Monster Garage, and Mike and I were out in the garage the other day talking about the rear end on the 1967 Chevelle when I found a mistake in the video we made. So I went back and re-recorded this video back from 2020 during COVID.
Moving things around here in Meldrum's Monster Garage, and we got the 67 up on the left. And the first thing we'll probably attack here is the rear end on this car. Oh, whoa, is this rear end? You know, we talked about my leaky pinion seal, but this is way beyond a leaky pinion seal. I mean, just look at these gears. Look at that big old chunk out of that gear. Woo! Look at the parts down here. Wow. Somebody didn't have a good day at the drag strip when this happened. It's probably the last day this car drove. So we are going to take this rear end out of the car. And Michael had another rear end in stock, which is sitting right over here on the bench right now. And this is a code KK rear end. So hopefully you guys know what that means. But if not, we'll give you a lesson real quick here. All right, so here we are underneath the 67 Chevelle. And as you can see, this is where we identify what type of rear end gear ratio we would have in the car. Now, if you're looking at this very closely, you'll see the letter CZ, and I went and looked that up, and that stands for 273 posi rear end. Okay? The B means it was made in Buffalo, and then of course the 0213 is for some date coding there. So second month, 13th day, and maybe 13 wasn't so lucky for this rear end. But another thing to identify, let me swing around here, is the date code. And the date code is right down in this little corner on the casting, and I believe this is January 27th, 1967. So there you go. I think the car was built in February. I'm going to double check that. So that makes sense that this is the original rear end. And we will send this off to Henderson's Driveline probably to get repaired. In the meantime, to get this car rolling again, we got this nice little beefy rear end sitting on the shelf here. And this is what we call a code KK rear end. And it is a 410 posi rear end. And then if we zip around to the casting number, which is in basically the same spot down there.
Actually, I read that code wrong, and I'm redoing this video from a few years ago, actually September of 2020, and Mike and I were looking at this rear end today and trying to decide what to do with this car, and I reread and retook a picture of this, and if you can see this, there's like a dot and then a 12 and then a 7 and then another dot. It's not a 0 like I thought it was. So this would be basically January 12th of 1967. So that's what that rear end decoded out as, not January of 1970. So on the back of this tube, you'll also see the KK, which denotes a 410 rear axle. But I believe starting in 1970 model year, they put CKK. So this isn't a 70 rear end. It is a 67 rear end. KK is correct for a 410. So there you go. A lot of misinformation out there, including from this idiot, Mark Meldrum, Meldrum's Monster Garage. Hopefully I got you straightened out now on this rear end in the 67, and Mike too, as we move forward with what we want to do with this car. So the rest of this video is changing out the rear end and adding new brakes with backing plates. So let's take a look at that.
All right, how hard could this be? We're going to take this rear end completely out, and put that rear end over on the bench there, back up in here. So I've done this on just the frame without a body on top of it, but today we're going to do it with the body on top. So can't be much different than replacing the springs. We've done that video a few times. So we'll take the shocks off. We'll take the lower control arm off. We'll take the upper control arm off up here. But before we do that, we've got to disconnect the brake line up here. And we've also got to disconnect the emergency brake line here. And we've already got the drive shaft removed, so we don't have to do that. And then we got to figure out how to take this down. I'm up on the lift right now, and I can loosen the bolts and get ready to do it, but I'm not going to let it drop all the way down to the floor. So we'll figure something out there. All right, here we go. Okay, why it's up on the lift here, what I did was I went ahead and disconnected the brake lines on each side. And as you can see, it's already disconnected from the rear end because the cover's off. And hey, how you like that loop? Whoo, what was somebody thinking there? And I've disconnected the shocks, okay? And then I've got all the bolts loose that I said I was going to take off. I took the nuts off up on these, so they're just being held in slightly now. So now I'm going to take the car and I'm going to lower it, and we're going to put the tires right on these dollies so I can roll it around. So hopefully we get enough pressure off of the bolts that they will slide right out. Okay, here we go. If you don't see this, if you see this as my last video, I probably killed myself under the jack. All right, now we got the car down on the ground, and I used my little electric impact to back out the bolts, which works quite nicely. Once the threads kind of get engaged, it'll back out very nicely. If you try to do it by hand, it's going to be kind of tough. And don't forget to support the center punk in the front of it, because everything's going to want to tilt forward because of the weight of the rear end and how it's balanced. So now we're going to go over the jack or the lift and lift this up. All right, there you go. The rear end is setting on the ground, and hey, don't forget, if you forget to take your springs out, they'll just go rolling where they want to go. They came right out. But easy peasy. I see we got some brake fluid finally leaking, and we'll get a new line on there and take care of that. I just thought it'd be easier to get to with the rear end out. So hey, we'll keep going. Guys and gals, we've taken these bushings out of the freezer, and we are going to drive them right into the location here on the rear end. Okay, so we've already cleaned this out. We're going to spray a little lubricant on there. Okay, my engineering students, why do we freeze this? So it contracts, it gets smaller. Now I could put some heat on here to make this actually bigger, but I don't think we'll need that. We're gonna put this in here, and we're gonna tap it kind of slightly just to get it started. Okay, and notice I've got my BFHs. You know what BFH stands for. Hey, this is a snap-on one from Rick Hurling. God bless you. Rest in peace. This is one I got to swap me. We can try both. They're about the same height, but you don't have to have fancy tools to do this. I'm going to take a 4x4, a block of wood, and we're going to drive this in. So, boom. How do I know when to stop? There's a ledge. Woo! Come on, get on the end of that hammer, Mark, and pound that thing in there. Okay, here we are on Sunday. Got a little interrupted yesterday. Had to run out to Aurora, Ohio and pick up some supplies, some hand-me-downs for baby Mac from the cousins out in Aurora. So we got that all situated. Got Patty a little present too, so that's pretty cool. I'll show you more on that later. But here we are, the new rear end. Got some tires on there to make it easy to roll around. And then I went ahead and set it up on a roller on the pumpkin so that wouldn't tip down. Remember, it's all balanced so it'll tip down right now. Kind of loosey-goosey. And we've got the suspension hanging up here. And we will drop the lift down on top of this and see how that goes. Okay, wish me luck. All right, there you go. Got the rear end up in its place right now. I put a couple tires on, and I used, while the car was down on the ground, I used my dollies to kind of jockey it around. And I got 3 bolts in place. And this one right here didn't want to line up until I used the transmission jack to get the rear end up a little bit more and in its true location. So I've got to go over to the old rear end and steal some parts so I can mount the shocks, and I got to let this rear end back down a little bit so I can put the springs back in. But then we'll be all set as far as locating this rear end in place. Well, this is the first time I had to do this on rear springs. I actually had to compress them so they would fit up into the pocket. So, something different. All right, there you go. The rear end is under the car, and job complete. I'll tell you what, they put some really, really stiff springs in this rear end. I don't know, I've never had to compress rear springs to fit them in. And this thing's setting awful high. I had to do all sorts of things to get those springs in place, like compress the springs, and I had to use a transmission jack to kind of get the rear end cattywampus or at a severe angle just to get the shocks on. So, hey, it's all done. We're back to a roller, and we'll take the rear end cover off and see if the rear end is actually a 410 gear like it's stamped, and make sure we're in good shape there. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we've got to get new brakes on the rear end here. There are no brakes on this rear end. So what I did is I went ahead and ordered something from Inline Tube. Inline Tube is one of my favorite vendors, and the brakes are all fully assembled on a back plate. So that should be interesting. We'll have to pull the rear axles out to get that back plate that's fully stuffed with new brakes on. But hey, that shouldn't be too big of a deal. And I'm looking to do more rear end projects this winter. I might change the ratio on the rear end of the Aquaman. So we'll see what happens. Now we got to turn our attention to this big block sitting over here in the corner. Not in the corner, next to the 72 Chevelle. And see what we can do about getting this motor under the hood of this Chevelle. Hey, I know you guys can't get enough of my rear end, so here we are underneath the 67 Chevelle. And what we need to do is pull the axles out so that we can change the brake, the rear brakes on here. So what we're going to do, we're putting a whole new system in with backing plate and everything. So it's already pre-assembled and whatnot. So all we got to do is take out the rear axles, and that's not that big of a deal. I already had to have this rear axle cover off just to see what was inside here anyway. It is a 410 gear, 12 bolt rear end we're looking at here. And what you need to do before you pull out the rear end, and we're looking at these 2 items right here. They're the splines, and here is the C-clip that holds them in. Okay, so it's not too difficult. I already got one out. I'll show you how to get the other one out. We're going to roll over here, and I'm going to push the rear axle in. Okay, just a little bit.
Okay? Now, you guys probably saw the C-clip drop, hopefully, and then we can take a magnet and hopefully we'll just pull it right out. There you go. There's the C-clip, as easy as that. And now what you can do is pull the rear axle out. You'll see it come out, and then I'll show you in a second. So there you go. Pulled out the rear axle. I'll show it to you in a second. Alright, so I moved the camera around so you can see me pull the rear axle out. The C-clip is out, and this is simply going to walk right out. Okay, there you go. There's the spline, and then there's where the C-clip was. I'm all whited out, so there's the C-clip where that was setting in the rear axle to keep it from pulling out. Okay, there you go. Now you can see the backing plate here that we're going to take off. And we got 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this backing plate's pitted and probably warped, and we'll show you a brand new one in a second. Alright, I don't remember if I showed you this at the start of the video, but one thing you need to do is take the this big pin out before you can push the axles out a little bit. So I went ahead and marked it. So there's I put a blue mark there and a blue mark here just so I put it in the same place. And you got to be careful when you're rotating things around, because there are some washers in there that could get out of place a little bit. So when you put this thing in, you might have to wiggle and jiggle and move it around a little bit just to get everything back in place. So, and then once we get that in place, we've got a bolt that we'll put in from the other side. So let me do some wiggling and jiggling. Alright, so getting these backing plates off might not be as easy as it looks. There's just 4 bolts, and you can see I got the new gasket on here. But the other side went easy peasy. The 4 bolts came out and the backing plate came off. This one was another story. The bolts would not loosen up. I actually had to cut the heads off of each bolt. And that's okay about all the grind marks on here, because this is a backing plate that's, you know, it's pretty beat up. So we're not going to use it anyway. But yeah, I guess been on there for 50 years or so. Sometimes they want to be stubborn when they come off. I had to cut the nuts, the heads off, and then I had to pound the bolts right through the hole here. The nuts weren't giving up on it. So some of the stuff you run across when you're working on these old cars that are rusty and crusty. But hey, we got all new parts, and we'll put them on. Let me show you. Alright, so there you go. You got the new backing plate on with fully assembled brakes, new springs, everything brand new. Fantastic. We'll take the emergency brake cable and we'll shove it through there and attach it back in here. And then we'll shove the rear axle in, put the C-clip in, and be all set to go. Alright, so we got the pin in there, and now that the axles can't come in anymore. Of course, they got the C-clips, but this pin's what really keeps them from moving back and forth. So what we'll do is we'll rotate. Whoops, the pin just dropped down. So I better keep so it doesn't drop down again. And get this over to the point, okay, where I can put the bolt in there and hold it in place. Alright, so it's got to hit a flat, so I've got to rotate this a little bit too, so it hits the flat when it goes in there. So more wiggling and jiggling. There it goes. So we'll tighten that up, and then we'll be all set to put a cover back on this and get some lubrication in there, get some gear lube in there, and get some posi what do you call it? Additive, posi traction additive in there. Ugh, nice and greasy now. I don't want to hit the camera, but I have to. It took off pretty good.
enough guts to drive that.
That was fun. That was fun.
It's a race car.
You should see people looking, boy.
Hey,
Shit.
it's a race car. Backup lights are on.
Yeah, the backup lights are on the whole way.
The backup lights are on.
We have brake lights?
The backup lights are on the whole way.
It works, yeah. They have backup lights.
No brake lights?
How did it drive? What did brake
So how did it drive? The brakes work?
Barely.
Barely.
Barely. you have to pump them a couple of times. I think it's going to get disc.
You made it up to 70 or so at least.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I never hammered it or nothing. I was scared.
It was.